A lot is changing in the world, so maybe where your food comes from isn't such a pressing thought. But there's a whole lot happening in the agricultural sector, which is very important for everyone's future. How is it in the world of vertical farming? Who benefits from the new trade agreement? How is a mud-dipped masterpiece a creative approach to carbon farming? You'll hear all about it and more in this video. First, get ready for vertical farming. With the supply chain still being disrupted more than we'd like, and a lot of people turning to healthier, more local food as consciousness grows, and climate change is expected to affect the yield of crops, there's a certain sub-segment of agriculture that is seeing a growing interest from venture capitalists. We're talking about controlled environment agriculture, which includes vertical farms that rely on artificial light and technology. It's expected that this sub-segment will grow almost $10 billion in market share by 2026, a development that is propelled by a decrease in arable land, which is associated with traditional farming, which is also on its way to be cut in half by the middle of the century. But some are saying that vertical farming might be the solution. In these indoor spaces, food is grown without soil and using artificial LED lighting, but the cost of setting up such a farm is astronomical, relying heavily on investor capital, and maybe the technology hasn't been perfected yet either. Not to mention that it might be harder than expected for people to get used to indoor-grown food. But companies like FarmX clearly see more benefits than just meeting demand. They use it as a tool to reactivate abandoned warehouse plots as well. It could bring entire neighborhoods back to life, which would be mutually beneficial. Something to think about. Next, sheep farmers are amongst those who will benefit from the new trade agreement. The new trade agreement with India is going to be very beneficial for a lot of industries, and one of those industries is the sheep industry. India is a huge market with a growing middle class. It has a lot of potential to be a very attractive market for Australia, and this agreement will enable Australia's industry to be better placed to provide for some of India's demand. The agreement also fits very well with Australia's diversified portfolio, whereby the industry cautiously matches specific cuts with market segments and cuisines. The removal of the tariff will be a great help towards providing more certainty for the sheep trade. There are some obstacles that will need to be looked at before it truly starts to pay off, mainly logistics. In India, one of the problems exporters ran into was a lack of refrigeration. This is why meat generally gets processed and consumed within the same day in India, but things can only get better once the storing issue has been tackled. However, it might take a while before the local industry starts to see the benefits of the new agreement, because at the moment there are also some shipping restrictions in the way. India has an ongoing import demand for quality products that will service five-star catering and high-end retail segments, and now Australia will undoubtedly continue to help meet that demand. Following Agriculture Minister can have the power to stop carbon farming projects if they are deemed adverse to communities. Agriculture Minister David Littleproud and Energy and Emissions Reduction Minister Angus Taylor said in a statement that new native vegetation projects beginning at a certain size must get the Agriculture Minister's approval starting April 8, 2022. The coalition government has created a rule that allows the minister to prevent new projects if they are deemed detrimental to farming and regional communities. The new law that gives the minister the right to veto will apply to all projects that are more than 15 hectares or more than one-third of a farm. Mr. Littleproud said that he will not hesitate to act and protect community and agricultural interests over corporate and passive investors. One of the reasons behind the decision is to prevent farms from becoming locked up and havens for weeds and feral animals as families leave the land. Under these changes, projects must now also report on pest and weed management compliance with state and local laws. At the time the changes were proposed, industry group the Carbon Market Institute opposed the changes because there was a lack of supporting evidence, constraints on landholder decision-making, inadequate consultation, and stifled confidence among investors and service providers. According to CMI Chief Executive John Connor, the rules are a direct intervention onto landholder decision-making, imposing excessive red tape and more a response to undocumented concerns about impacts on agricultural production or local communities. However, it won't be until the end of 2023 before the new veto rule will be reviewed by the government. Wait a second, did you hear about the tax breaks that are given in return for national support for net zero by 2025? And we still have to talk about the mud-dipped masterpiece next up in this video. So let's start with farmers are given tax breaks in return for national support for net zero by 2050. Despite the new rule, a key measure the Nationals say they secured in return for supporting the government's net zero by 2050 target is giving farmers that make money by selling carbon credits a tax break. The tax concessions, estimated to be worth over $100 million million over 4 years as one of the measures the coalition partner requested in return for its support of the climate target. The change means carbon farming income can be treated like other primary production income for tax reasons. The changes will allow farmers to contribute to profits from selling Australian carbon credit units, ACCUs, into farm management deposits, a scheme intended to help farmers average their incomes. Mr. Littleproud said there's hundreds across the country already in carbon farming, but did not say how many farmers he expected to take up carbon farming as a result of the tax incentive. There's a complexity of getting into it, especially if it's part of the emissions reduction fund, which he says is justified, because if those carbon credits don't have veracity, they're not worth the paper they're written on. The tax incentive is coming into effect on July 1st, 2022, and will apply to carbon credits accredited under the emissions reduction fund. And now, mud-dipped masterpiece, a creative approach to carbon farming conversation. A pure white cotton material is draped over the shoulder of Jane Milburn as she navigates through the sinking black soil that is so typical to farming in this region, 50 kilometers west of Moree and northwest New South Wales. It's the only thing that sets her apart from the rest of the against the brown backdrop. She throws out the fabric and lets it float down, painting the fabric with the mud that helped grow it. Milburn is an advocate for slow fashion and plans to convert the farm-grown cotton material into a dress to wear and tell the story about the place where it came from, which is the carbon-positive farming operation owned by Sundown Pastoral, Kita Farms. Her visit to the farm is part of the Painted River Project, which combines creativity and science to highlight the importance of healthy waterways. The project started in Western Sydney in 2017 and extended to the Moree region in 2021, thanks to a collaboration between Western Sydney University and the Bank Art Museum Moree. Milburn says that a lot of farmers are cautious about opening their doors, partly because they can be subject to criticism. She thinks transparency and shining light and showing the good things farmers do is important. Also at the farm is Leo Raba, a lecturer at Western Sydney University and at the helm of the city artist pilgrimage to the West each year. And, according to him, the artists want to contribute and understand the carbon conversation, not just create. Finally, the responsibility of the consumer. The view that farmers waste water is simplistic in the eyes of Raba. They're running a business. It's simply in their best interest to be responsible. Kita farm manager Nick Gillingham says he doesn't mind the company the project has generated and the chance to gain direct feedback from the consumer. It helps them figure out what they need to do to make sure they'll keep their right to maintain their license to farm in the public sector. They were one of the first farms that do a really thorough study on carbon farming, increasing their levels from 2013 to 2018, and Gillingham hopes that it will only be a few years until they'll continue to go up. Now there are many in the broad acre sector who use minimal soil disturbance practices and slowly build the health of the soil to increase yields. But Gillingham reminds us sustainable decisions are still being motivated by consumer demand and at the forefront of every political talk. Meanwhile, Milburn makes her way back to somewhere less muddy, her mud-dipped masterpiece carefully preserved. She says it's also how we, as wearers, use the cotton that is made. Wear something until it actually wears out, then there really shouldn't be an issue. If we put less stress on the production by lowering demand, this would relieve a lot of the pressure. It's everyone's responsibility to make sustainable choices. Now you're all up to date on what's up in the agricultural sector. What do you think about vertical farming and Jane Milburn's mud-dipped masterpiece? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching.